Hey everybody, Jeff from Programmers vs. World. And yes, I've got a lot more toys and a lot more things that can go wrong during a tutorial all set up for you. I got a chroma key behind me, the new ScreenFlow I finally updated, and I'm looking at just the specific browser section. I've got all kinds of new things, and I'm doing this all for the first time on a brand new tutorial series, which is going to be AEM. I'm going to try to do it and Sling in parallel now that I've actually gotten some free time. And I thought today what we'd do is we'd talk about how to basically take all the Geometrixx stuff out of Adobe CQ and create your own website to basically start with. Now, when I first started in CQ 5.4, these tutorials are really hard to find, and I know now there's probably 1,000 of them, but I got to start somewhere, right? So I'm going to use CQ 6.1 basically because I don't think that many people are going to be using 5.4 or 5.5. If you are, tell me about it. I'll make a tutorial for it too. There's very little differences except for our components will be JSP and we won't be using Sightly. I'm going to try to stick to Sightly now because that's the way I want to teach in Sling, and that's the way I prefer to teach in AEM, and I think that's their recommendation as well. So with AEM started, if we log into the admin console with the super secure password admin as it always is when you start up, I'm running this through a Docker, so some of these startups are really slow. I'm going to cancel this and say remind me later, but it's on a Docker. Basically, if we come here to sites, we're going to see that when it gets through loading, that we have quite a few. And basically, there's a Geometrixx e-commerce outdoors site, what it looks like on mobile. There's then a demo corporate site, and then what it looks like on mobile. Then there's a media site, and then there's a government site. They have all these samples. Trying to work, like if you're starting off from scratch with a brand new project, trying to work with all this stuff in there is a real pain in the butt, especially when you can't figure out later how to get your load balancers to point at a specific URL, and accidentally one day all this fake Geometrixx stuff comes up on your corporate, external facing website. It's a good idea to learn how to get rid of it all. This is a relatively new admin console, all touch UI and all nice, but the truth is I don't ever use it. I come like two projects right here and click on this little guy, and it takes me back to this screen, which I'm more comfortable with. It's like, I don't mean to sound like I'm old, but I'm old. All right, so the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna get rid of Geometrixx. And the easiest way to do that is to come into Packages, which is down here. Click on it. And because I'm in a Docker, this search does not always work, but for you, you should be able to go to Geometrixx with 2 X's and search for it. And correction. And search for it, and you should be able to find all the Geometrixx packages that exist. This almost never works inside my Docker. On my Mac, it works everywhere else. I'm going to go ahead and stop it. Yours will probably find it. Let me move this up a little bit so that the whole thing's in the window. Yours will probably find it, but if not, you can just scroll down looking for the words Geometrixx, and you eventually hit this package that says Geometrixx all right here, this guy. Just CQ-Geometrixx-all package. If you take that guy right there and say go away, it'll also get rid of all the sub packages and all that clutter and get it out of here. Wow, that was fast. 3.7 seconds. It's pretty much a record for this Docker. Okay, so Geometrixx is now removed. We can close the package manager, and if we come back in here now and go into sites, we'll have a couple folders maybe, but all that site clutter is gone, which is good. All right, so we'll go back to our admin console now, and we'll go into CRXDE Lite, which is our mini IDE here, which most people have mixed feelings about it. Honestly, for simple components, I don't know why you wouldn't use it. It's a lot easier than trying to build a Maven project for it. But if you're doing more complex stuff and you want to keep your content in source control, not the best strategy to deal with just DE Lite. I've seen a lot of people lose code before. And hopefully we won't this time. So if you remember our Sling tutorial, the reason I say that is I've done this dry walkthrough a couple times and I've already lost code. Anyway, so if you remember our Sling tutorial, we had an apps directory, and I had you guys get used to building a folder underneath there and putting your components. Hey, that's why. We also created a content directory, which is unusual for Sling, and I had you put your sites underneath there. Hey, look at that. So basically, all I was trying to do is sort of groom you so that when you move over here into CRXDE Lite, you at least know what 2 or 3 of the folders are. And in that case, it's apps and content. Now, Etsy, home, config, really, there's a bin file, system, temp, and var. Believe it or not, you're not going to use them as much as you think, so they're not really that important, but we're going to do the bulk of our work in apps and content. Actually, we won't even get to content today. We're just going to deal with apps. So our apps folder is still the same as it was in Sling. This is going to be the name of our application. So in this case, we want to create a new folder underneath apps, just like we would in Sling, and create an app. We'll call this PVW tutorial. I'll just brand my own tutorial. And inside this folder, I want to create 2 other folders. I want to create a folder for my components. Remember, we did this in Sling as well. And I also want to throw a kink at you, and I want you to create a folder called templates. Now, I don't know that save all was necessary, but do get in a habit of clicking Control S or that save all a lot. Even though you're going to change things in here and hit OK, that doesn't mean it's changed until save all is hit. And that's how you end up losing code. And that's why people fight and have little hissies over this web-based IDE, for lack of a better word. Okay, so components and templates. Here, we're not actually building websites like we were in Sling. We're building ways that authors can build more sites inside the CMS. So we added a layer of abstraction on top of it. Now we want to build a template so that a user can create pages off of that template, and it's like a cookie cutter, right? So all the places where they can insert or remove and drag new things is all being predefined by a specific template. So a template is like the class, pages are like the objects, the instances of that template. And you can have as many templates as you want. Each template, though, is going to point to at least one component that's going to be responsible for rendering it. Now, that component may include a whole bunch of others, but that's just the way it works. So to get started, what we really have to do first is create a template. And lucky for us, when working in, what in the world's going on, in DE Lite, when we click create, you've got node, file, and folder, and this is the same as creating any node in Apache Sling, right? You're going to have to tell it what kind of type it is, and if it's unstructured or not. File and folder are self-explanatory, but it also has project bundle, template, component, dialog. These are really helpful because they have wizards that help you fill out all the attributes, and you don't have to figure out how to do that on your own. The downside is there's a lot more times where you're going to be creating nodes and having to do that than you are going to be doing this. As a component developer, though, this create component is a lifesaver, right? But let's create a template first by clicking on create template. In classic CQ fashion, you're going to always be asked for a label, a title, a name, and a description of some kind. I usually hit the space bar inside of here, and this is a hack, because the ones that don't allow spaces tend to be more internal, and it's needed for hierarchy and reference. It's like an internal ID, whereas the ones that allow spaces are just a user-friendly thing. In this case, the label is actually the internal ID. So let's call this like main page template. Depending on the coding standards of your organizations, they may ask you how you would capitalize this or not. I'm used to seeing components and templates and pages always start with lowercase for the internal, but their titles always are proper case, or all formal cased like this. This is the PVW tutorial main page template. Let's do something more redundant. So we have a label, title, and description filled out. Resource type is just like we were used to dealing with in Sling. I probably just moved in the camera and left a big open space over here or whatever. The resource type is just like we were used to in Sling. It's going to point to a specific folder, which is going to have the renderer for it. And we don't need the leading slash. So remember, we created the directory, actually it's right here, PVW tutorial. a slash components, and then we'll just call a main page component. Now it doesn't exist yet, and it's no big deal. We're going to create it next. We have to, otherwise this is really a moot point. So we have everything filled out. We have our resource type, and this is starting to look like a node, isn't it? Like this is just a node, and then when we hit it, it's going to render this component, and that's exactly what it is. It's just in an unusual place. When we click the next button, we're going to have each part of the wizard's going to have a different section that it's going to, where it's going to ask you for things that you can fill out. Sorry if I stuttered there. It sounded like my pool guy was outside. This allowed paths tells the CQ system where this template is actually allowed. And we actually want to create a restriction here. We actually want to say that it's only used in the content directory forward. And I'm sorry, I really apologize. We have to use regular expressions to do this. We have to do that, okay? And the good news is you're not going to be building many templates, not as a component developer anyway. The bad news is regex is the way that you're actually going to, or regex is the way you're actually going to have to fill these out. We're not going to worry about allowed parents for now, allowed children. These are all just restrictions on the template. And notice when we hit that, all these things are highlighted red down here where it put in these properties. That's why we got to remember to hit save all. If we don't, we get in real trouble. So just tell you now, the way you get in trouble with CRXDE Lite is before you hit save on that, you actually come in here and then open something else underneath it and try to modify that. Before you hit the save, you're going to get this bizarre error. You're going to have to refresh CRXDE Lite to get out of it, and you're going to lose all your stuff, which happens a lot. It's probably going to happen here because I never remember before I open the file up. All right, so now that we got now that we have a template, and we'll look in here in the content, we'll notice that we pointed to the right place, right? PVE tutorial components, and we needed a main page component. So let's click on our components, say create component. Remember, this time for the label, we want to call it the right thing. Super type is for inheritance. Group is for where it shows up in the sidekick. These are all things we'll cover in a future tutorial. This is not a component that's going to show up in the sidekick, by the way, so we don't care. We're not going to fill out any of this stuff. This is really tricky for special cases in which you have components that contain other components, or you want to bypass the CSS, or the dialogue for editing the component is going to be somewhere other than inside the thing. We don't really care about allowed parents. That just allows you to restrict where this thing can be used, the children, whatever. Now, before we do anything else, hit save. Now, if we open this up, we'll see that there's a JSP file in here that it started for you. Now remember, this is kind of important to keeping track of. Libs Foundation Global is actually in there. That's part 2. I'll show you how to do that later. So this is, right, so we get into a conversation here about, once again, what your company wants you to use. Some companies have spent exhaustive efforts in creating tag libraries for the older Adobe CQ, so much so that they really don't want to part from JSP being the primary templating language they're using. The big push now is to move to Sightly, which is also renamed to HTL. I know they keep confused. They'll rename it tomorrow too, and I won't know what it is. But point being is it's a safer, more, I guess, it's just a better looking templating language itself, and it's also safer, and it tends to be more readable. So it's sort of improved the landscape somewhat. Now, we're not going to build a JSP template today. If you want me to, leave it in the comments and I'll create a video for you. Otherwise, I'm not even going to touch it. It's really pointless to do so. Most companies today that started with Adobe 6.1 or higher are not even using it. So to change this over to Sightly, just like we did in Sling, all we really need to do is change this extension at the end to HTML. Now, make sure you hit save all. Now the assumption will be it's always using the Sightly template. So we're not going to go crazy here and actually really structure a real template. I'm just going to come in and add some things so we can definitely see that it's working. This is about the part that we were in part 1 of our Sling tutorial, if you remember. And you would think this would be much more complicated than what we did in there, and the truth is it's just done a little bit differently. The same things generally cause the same results, right? This is the test page, and nothing's changed with my spelling, by the way. I still make typos all over the place and then make you sit there and scream at your monitor while I continue typing. Okay, so we hit save all there. We now have, that's funny that still says JSP. We now have a HTML page template. Doesn't really do anything, doesn't allow a user to interact with it, but it gets the point across. So now we should be able to use this thing, right? So before we can use it, we actually have to create a website and then put a page that uses this template in, right? Just like we explained earlier. And I don't want to use this thing. There is a way to do this, believe it or not. Maybe it is worth showing you. You can come in here and say create and say create page, and then that's our template right there. This is the Pew tutorial. Hold on a second, guys. I would allow this normally, but since it's referencing like PewDiePie, I don't really want to leave that in there. All right, so you can create a site by hitting the create button right here and using the template, and there is a way to use this touch UI. I don't know anyone that started in CQ5.4 that's yet 100% comfortable with this thing. Too much really changed. So once again, it's always easier to click that little screen next to projects and come here, because almost everyone has had to deal with this editor, which is the website manager, at one point or another. So in order to create a site, this stuff in here, these are not really websites per se, but they are. These are really just pre-built pages that existed for, actually a lot of Geometrixx stuff is still out here, even though the pages have been cleaned up, like PhoneGap and all this other stuff. This is actually used later when you want to create like mobile applications through PhoneGap, or you need to use Adobe Forms or whatever. We're going to create a website here. Now I know the temptation is to click on websites and say, hey, new site. That's actually not how we do it. I know it's unintuitive. We say new folder, and we're gonna, once again, I'll hit space in there. Notice this won't allow a space, so I'll call this one Programmer versus World. See how it won't allow a space? That's a good idea that it's an internal ID. Programmer. Here's the title. We'll create it. We now if we click on it, we'll notice there's no pages in it. We can say new page. Use our template. That allows a space. That doesn't. Obviously, name is now the internal ID. I told you this gets confusing. So we'll call this main page, create. We don't have a save all button. You'll see me constantly go up here to click it. It doesn't exist. It's force of habit from spending way too much time in DE Lite. So now we have a page that uses our template. So if we double click on it, I usually double click on the one. It keeps me from selecting the text inside there. It'll say that it's finished loading, but if I come up here to the URL, I probably have editor.html shoved in the middle of it. Now, the real trick of understanding AEM is getting used to all the little quirks that are inside of it. One of the quirks is, by default, when you double click a page in there, it always tries to bring up the responsive editor, which is a whole nother bandwagon. When we start off slow with just building normal pages, we may snap in Bootstrap or Foundation and start from there. Then I would show you the responsive templates and how to build responsive apps that can work well on mobile and not. That's a whole nother design discussion. Here we're just trying to do a simple page and get it done, which means that editor, wrong editor for us. We have to go back to the old classic content author editor, which for some reason is named CF Pound. Don't know the answer to that one. I'm just used to putting it there. Now, if we put that in that URL, we'll get, this is the test page, and we also get our little damn browser and other stuff over here, which you can close, by the way, just like that. Now, you also notice that we put a title in, this is a test title, yet when we're sitting over, oops, sorry, where did it go? See, the title already messed me up. It actually says AEM Content Finder. This is because we're not actually going to the site the way we do in Sling, right? We inserted this CF in between it. That means we're going to go to the rest of the path, but only after this specific editor loads. And that editor is kind of displaying our content, and that's what the authors are going to see. If we wanted to go just to the page, we can take that out. Now it's starting to look just like our Sling URLs, and you'll notice that the title and the thing worked. And we can always hit the back button to go back to our CF editor and refresh. And now this little guy will be right here. Now, for those of you not familiar with Adobe CQ or AEM, I'm getting used to calling it a new name for me too, even though it's probably been called that for years now. This little browser over here allows you to get to other assets that are actually, this is for instance is what's called the Digital Asset Manager, or the DAM. Your mileage may vary with how many puns you can make out of that. This is actually for manuscripts, documents, movies, other stuff that's actually in the asset manager. So this is a quick way that if I created a page that allow you to drop things on it, which is what we'll eventually get to, I could just drag one of those over and bam, the image goes in. Or maybe I have an image component, and when I edit it, one of the things is, what image do you want? I could drag it over there and it'll put the path in for me. It's that kind of thing. But what have we done? Well, we created a template. We created a component as the renderer for that template. We created a new site, and then we created a page using our template inside that site, and we did it all without a major error. That's a miracle for this channel. I figured I'd be sitting here troubleshooting for at least 5 minutes and then trying to figure out whether I was going to edit that out or not. But so this is where I'm basically going to stop. Not basically going to stop. I actually am going to stop here. And we have to move in small steps. Adobe CQ is another platform in which there's 1,000 different ways to do something. We just created a very simple template. Later, we'll put spots in here where the users can drag stuff, and then we'll build a component to allow them to drag it in there. And like I said, I'm going to use something like Zerb Foundation or something that's not built into CQ already, because when it comes to, like, let's go to Etsy Client Libs, Foundation, jQuery is already in there. You know, a whole bunch of stuff is already built in here. I actually want to use something that's not, so that will actually show you how to import maybe a completely different library that you want to use. Common question is, do we have any client-side stuff like Knockout or Angular and this kind of stuff? And the answer is no, at least not when I was using 5.4. We used Knockout in a couple places actually, and it worked really well. But in part 2, when I show you how to put client libs in, and we actually restyle this goofy little page we have with CSS and put in a parsys so that we can actually start dropping content on it, you'll see that once you've done it one time, it's not remotely difficult to figure out how to do it again. Another important part, and this came up when I was doing this tutorial live for someone one day, is just because the templates directory is underneath our app doesn't mean that only our app can use that page template. Weird, huh? So let me explain it another way. Let's say PhoneGap actually was a real website, which it is, and I come in here and I say I want to create a new page. That template's still going to show. It wasn't restricted to just the usage that we had. It can be, and that's generally why there's this path regular expression in it, is so that we can restrict where it's used, because we put that path in though, and all those sites exist underneath content. They're all allowed to use that template. We can restrict it further. We can be very explicit and say it's only our app can use that page, in which case it won't show up for paths that don't allow it. The core of AEM is very complex, but it's also very intelligent with how it picks up and does things. So that's at least one question. If you have any more questions, put them down at the bottom. I'll try to answer them. I am not by any means an AEM expert. I worked for 2 news stations here in Orlando, Florida for about 2 years that use it exclusively for their news channel. And I spent more time building like radar weather image feeds and traffic camera components and stuff like that than I ever did building pages. We did, however, work with scaffolds and nodes and some advanced stuff later, but I didn't build the page from scratch, and I don't think most of you will. Most of you that are getting jobs in AEM are going to come in and they're going to already have all this stuff built. But right before I left, at the end of my career, we had to build a site from the ground up, and it was a very simple site, and it was just there to let users know what's happening with channel negotiations for the cable company that owned the news stations. And yeah, I got that experience of building it from the ground up, and it actually, once I deleted everything that was in there and built one from the ground up, I started to realize just how close to Sling it really was, and how close to the metal it was, and how much fun it actually is. So yeah, okay. Yeah. All right, so you guys have a good one. I'm going to get out of here, process this video, and start looking at how to create part 2. I was going to start the Sling tutorial part 3, but I noticed there's only 170 some odd views on part 2, and I don't know if people have lost interest or people haven't seen it yet. So whenever that starts to beef up some more traffic, I'll go ahead and make that video. But until then, I just wanted to create this and get it out there because, yeah. Because I just happened to be working on an AEM project recently, and I thought, oh crap, I've never actually done one. And yeah, so you guys have a good one. I'm going to stop talking and get out. I'm out.